Mama used to drag me to church Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights. Khaki pants and a polo shirt. Boy, I put up a fight. She said, son, one day you'll thank me for having God in your life. And yeah, I know she was right. Yeah, my mama was right, 'cause now I'm talking to Jesus. She got me talking to Jesus. She got me talking to Jesus. Yeah, my mama was right, 'cause now I'm talking to Jesus. Yeah, I love talking to Jesus. And I'll be talking to Jesus for the rest of my life. What a friend we have in Jesus. What a friend we have in Jesus. Don't you know? What a friend we have in Jesus. Oh, what a friend we have. What a friend we have in Jesus. What a friend we have in Jesus. What a friend we have in Jesus. Oh, I've got 3 of my own now, trying to raise them upright. My oldest is 15, and I remember what that was like. Trying to deal with the trauma, trying to figure out the questions in life. And I've been looking for a way to show him how to make it all right. Then he walked in my room while I was saying my prayers the other night. He said, I'll come back later. I can tell you got a lot on your mind. I said, it's not an interruption. You couldn't have picked a better time. 'Cause I was just talking to Jesus. Come over and give it a try. We started talking to Jesus. We started talking to Jesus. We started talking to Jesus. Whoa. And now he's talking to Jesus. Thank God he's talking to Jesus. I hope he's talking to Jesus for the rest of his life. Yeah. What a friend we have in Jesus. What a friend we have in Jesus. What a friend we have in Jesus. Oh, what a friend we have. What a friend we have. Aren't you glad you have a friend? What a friend we have. Not more faithful, not more true. What a friend we have in Jesus. Oh, there's no wrong way to do it. There's no bad time to start. It don't have to sound pretty. Just tell them what's on your heart. 'Cause it's not a religion, no. 'Cause it's more like a friendship. So just talk to your Father like you are his kid. Just start talking to Jesus. Just start talking to Jesus. 'Cause you can talk to Jesus, oh, whenever you like. Just start talking to Jesus. Just start talking to Jesus. Just keep talking to Jesus for the rest of your life.
Good evening, everybody. I'm really needy. Could I have just even a little bit more enthusiasm? Good evening, everybody. There we go. There we go. Those that are online are going to think that there are thousands and thousands here, so that'll be awesome. A warm welcome to everyone that's made it out again. This is our third session of Wellness Matters, and as you can see from the signs behind me, what our topic is this evening, and Dr. Skidmore will be with you in just a few minutes to share the details of that. We do want to remind those that are online that if you do have questions, you can send them through, and we have somebody monitoring that. And for those of you that are here in person, at the same time, we have microphones there, and because everything is recorded, it is necessary for you to use a mic. I know that not everybody likes to go to a microphone, but if you do have a question, we'd like to make sure that everybody hears it, not only here in the room, but also, of course, those that are following online. I just want to give a bit of an introduction, but before I do that, I also want to thank somebody. This name may mean nothing to most of you, but Tom Caldwell is a friend that I've got to know just a little bit more in the last number of months, and Tom was instrumental in helping me organize this and pointing me to certain individuals and people who pointed me to certain individuals and people, and just enabled us to pull all of this together. So the conversation, I think, went back in the early fall, and then we kind of sped up and got through it. And we wanted Tom to participate, but unfortunately Tom's health wasn't real great at this time, and so he couldn't be here to minister, but we trust maybe somewhere down the road that Tom would be able to help us out in person. But we do want to say thank you to Tom. I want to say thank you to Tom for helping us organize this and pull this all together and put me in touch with the key people that have been sharing. And so thank you, Tom. We do appreciate that. I also just want to, again, extend my appreciation to our church family, to our church board, for having the willingness to help us do this. This isn't just for our church family. This is for our community, and of course, anybody that could follow this online. We've done our best to promote it as widely as we possibly could. Happy to say that there's been hundreds of views, so that's good. We're very pleased that there's been hundreds of views, and that they continue to tick up, even as we've moved now a few weeks away from the first one. So we're very happy about that. But at this time, it's my privilege to introduce to you Dr. Elizabeth Skidmore. She is a PhD, and she is a registered psychologist, a certified registered psychologist. She has over 30 years of experience working as a clinical psychologist, specializing in depression, anxiety disorders, trauma, and stress management, both in the United States and in Canada. An associate professor of psychology at Tennessee Technological University, and an adjunct instructor of psychology at Wayne State University in Detroit. She is an international speaker and trainer on topics such as life balance, stress management, developing a spiritual life, relational enhancement, post-traumatic stress, depression, and anxiety. And so we have someone that is more than qualified to be with us this evening, and I know that we're all going to benefit from the presentation that she has for us. Before we do that, let me just lead us in a short prayer. Heavenly Father, we are very grateful that we can be here tonight and to share, and we just pray that the information, the questions, the thoughts, the ideas that are expressed, the helps that are offered would indeed help us, body, soul, mind, and spirit, that it would be an encouragement not just to the church body that we call Essex Gospel, but to our communities that are in and around Windsor, Essex, and to those that may be following online from any distance at all. And so, God, glorify your name tonight, and we thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, let's give Elizabeth, Dr. Skidmore, let's give her a warm welcome. Thank you for coming.
Okay. Well, this is where I hope that I don't trip up the stairs, and I apologize for my voice. I feel fine, but I have some nerves, and I guess they're coming out in my voice. Thank you for coming. It's nice to have, look at this, it's like a cheering section over here. Very nice to see you. Thank you for participating tonight and also with our other venues. We have Dr. Lord, I think she's with us. She's going to be next week and the week after. And I hope that you heard Chris, because he had a lot of wonderful things to say about anxiety and also joy. Is Joy here today? Great. We really enjoyed what Joy had to say. Okay, we are going to start with, I love this title, don't you? Pandemic Fallout, Depression. As I was preparing for this, it was right on the heels of being involved in some continuing education that was online through the Ontario Psychological Association. And if we can have that next screen, here's a quote. The psychological footprint of COVID is bigger than the medical footprint. Isn't that surprising? When the pandemic first hit, I think there was so much fear that we had, and there was so much death, that it's very hard to read something like this and think, well, can that really be true? But it really is true. And just a couple of interesting statistics. Anxiety has quadrupled since the beginning of the pandemic. So we have surveys, Canada does surveys on a regular basis of mental health, and they had surveyed people right at the beginning of the pandemic, and then again, this would have been just several months ago. So in that almost 2-year period, what they found was anxiety had quadrupled, up 5%, which was at the beginning, to 20% of the population. Now this would be adults, so we're not even talking about the effect that it's had on children and teens, which we know has been very big as well. Depression has more than doubled. At the time of the first survey, 4% of the adult population had depression, and 2 years in, 10% were experiencing depression. That's huge. That is a very, very rapid increase. And interestingly enough, of those people that were reporting experiencing anxiety and depression, 1/3 of them indicated that their alcohol and cannabis use were up. 1/3. So clearly they're trying in some way to manage what it is that they're feeling. I thought we would have some fun tonight, so I hope that you're here to participate, because what I'd like to do is, while we're talking about the psychological footprint of COVID, I'd like you just to help me out by throwing out some feelings that maybe you had or that people have had since the pandemic. Fear, absolutely. Big, huge fear. Huge fear. Loneliness. Sadness. Anger, yes. Lots of anger. What else? Ladies first. Confusion. A lot of confusion. So much information. Too difficult to know what is true, what is real, what is not, right? And what was misinformation. And how does one know? I can't tell you how many times I've had clients in my office who've looked at me as though I might have the answer, but I told them that I didn't. They would say, how do we know what is true? How do we know who to believe? And one of the things that came to me when COVID first rolled out and we were watching what was happening, first of all, in Italy, and the doctors were coming out of retirement to work in the hospitals, and they were dying from COVID. And then we saw it break out in New York City, and we saw more dead bodies than the city could handle. The scripture that came to my mind was, men's hearts will be failing them for fear. And I was just remarking to my husband, I've not been one to watch the news. Part of the reason for that is when I was a little girl, who remembers the Cold War? I'm dating myself, but that was a big part of my childhood. And I was terrified of the news. I never watched the news, and as I became a professional, I understood that it was wise not to watch the news. I always kept myself up to date by reading headlines or reading magazines where I could limit what I took in. If I didn't want to read beyond just the headline, I didn't have to. But when the news is on, I am right there, and before you know it, they're showing me something that I'm not going to be able to get out of my mind, an image that is going to stay with me. So one of the things that I felt we would just sum up, okay, we've got a bunch of feelings, we're going to talk about those later, and we're going to put them in a cup, and we're going to see what we do with all of them, but I'd like to just talk about what we know about mental illness and the impact of COVID on existing mental illness. So anyone who was experiencing anxiety, I shouldn't say anyone, because some people, I don't know, maybe they live in a cave and they don't know what's been going on. But most people who had pre-existing conditions are worse now than they were. So if they had anxiety, if they had depression, if they had difficulty managing stress, they are more worn down now than they were. There have been new cases of depression and anxiety, people who've never experienced it before, since the pandemic. The pandemic has been a trigger for them. We have seen repeated exacerbations through lockdowns, have we not? So I would get people in my office, and finally things were opening up again, and they'd say, oh, I can go back to the gym, I think I'm going to be okay. And a month or two later, we'd be going into another lockdown. So there was this back and forth, a little bit of hope and then some hopelessness, along with a lot of a sense of powerlessness, people feeling like they had no power to change this, and they had a lot of difficulty coping with it. I think one of the things that we've seen over the last 2 years is extremes, and I'm sure you've seen them in churches, in politics. We've had the over-responders, and we've had the under-responders, haven't we? And that has been part of the confusion. The over-responders and the under-responders might all be in our same family if we have several siblings, right? And aunts and uncles, and it's hard to have a conversation with some people if they're at the extremes. And I do believe, please come back next week, because I believe Linda will be talking about this. Dr. Lord will be commenting on a lot of this next week. The great deal of uncertainty, as we commented, there's been a lot of misinformation. Who can we trust? And also the competing rights of individuals. So this group has a right to make a decision to do this, and this group has a right to make a decision not to do that. Again, many of these people are in our own families, and so we've had to navigate how to come up with what it is we feel we need to do for us while respecting others in our homes, churches, and communities for the decisions that they have made. And one of the things that came up repeatedly in the presentation that I was listening to was prolonged grief. Grief is not a type of depression. Grief is normal. It's the body's reaction to something very difficult. And it has a normal progression from an onset through a healing process. What we have seen with COVID, with many deaths, not being able to mourn those individuals early on in the pandemic, not being able to have funerals for them, not being able to visit them in the hospital, not being able to say goodbye. The profoundness of the grief has been such that people have not had normal social supports to navigate that in a realistic time frame, if that makes sense. So it's still ongoing and has become a tremendous problem. Now, I'm going to take some time and give you some clinical stuff on depression, because I think that every time I go somewhere to speak on depression, there are always people there who want to understand better what depression is. So I'm going to just take a little bit of time. But don't feel like you have to write anything down. It's just a general overview. The first thing I'd like to share with you is that some people have a pre-existing genetic loading, that's what I'm going to call it, a genetic loading that makes them more vulnerable to depression. So you'll see I've got 2 cups. I love Brent said these are the biggest Timmy's cup he's ever seen. But this is worse than a Tim's cup. This is a stress cup. Nobody wants to drink out of this. So what I've got 2 cups here. This is going to be for the person who does not have anxiety, depression, any kind of mental illness or substance abuse in their family. The second cup is going to demonstrate what it might look like kind of in a diagram if you have a genetic predisposition to any kind of a mental illness, okay? So for this person over here, we're going to be talking about heredity. And we're going to give this person, we're going to fill in, I don't like that color very much. They're going to come into life with some of this in the bottom of their cup already filled up. Now, this doesn't mean that they will definitely have difficulty navigating their mental wellness over their lifespan, but it means that they will be more vulnerable. We can be more vulnerable. We've found out a lot about genes in the most recent years, 10, 20 years. There may be a certain gene that predisposes us to be more anxious or depressed, or there may be a gene for resilience. So if somebody doesn't have that resilient gene, they might be more vulnerable to having a mental illness, or if they have a combination of loading. So I call it loading, and it's a funny word, but it's being genetically loaded already, like we're loading a gun. All right, but again, doesn't necessarily mean that that person will have difficulty with their mental wellness over time. So now I always do this in my office when new people come in because they don't understand, how did I get here? What's wrong with me? And typically I will say, well, let's just take hypothetically a person and we'll say, when they were children, it was a pretty good childhood, but mom and dad, there were some problems there. They did get divorced, and maybe there was a little bit of, not neglect, but the child didn't really feel like they had all the support they wanted, okay? Wow, now they're gonna go to high school. Not a great foundation, a divorced family, not feeling like they have a lot of support from the home, and maybe they're gonna go into high school and maybe that's gonna be tough for them. Maybe there's gonna be, I don't know, maybe some bullying. Okay. They finally get through high school. Thank goodness, they say, I don't have to go do that anymore, and they decide they can't decide what to do. A whole new time of stress. We have a lot of 20-somethings, late adolescents and 20-somethings now who they're not sure what to do. Okay, so we've got stress here, like, what do I do now? But the good news is they get into a relationship. All right, they have children. We're adding stress, right? So now what this represents is, this is my coping reservoir. So what that means is I can have good days, I can have bad days, and some days my cup will be fuller than others. But now we're going to take those feelings that you all just threw out at me, fear, uncertainty, depression, loneliness, boredom, and guess what? All of that is going to go in here. And before we know it, this person is overflowing. The overflow here can be an emotional illness. It can be a mental illness of some sort. It can be A poor coping response can be addiction, could be alcoholism, drug use, pornography, all kinds of things, right? So when people come in to see me, many times they're clueless as to what's wrong with them, but a lot of them have things like this in their life. And I say it's not just that these were times in our life, but it's like they get pressed down over time. Just like when we go on those beautiful, when we go down south and we see the rock formations on the sides of the roads, right? Those rocks have been just crushed down over years, and they are very thick. And so if you think about that too, we're talking about stacking stresses in here over time. Now we take this person over here, this poor person over here. What's going to happen to them? Let's get this color. This person, we're going to give them identical childhoods, some bullying, questioning, marriage, children, and then the pandemic. What's happening to them? There's no place for that to go. They can't handle that. So what I have been seeing and what the studies show is that people all over the world are struggling, not knowing how to navigate all of these feelings, all of this powerlessness and helplessness and confusion. So if that's how we got there, I'd like to just go to the next slide then, and let's just share what are the symptoms of depression. The main thing is a depressed mood. We also, now before I even say this, please do not diagnose yourself. Too late, she says. Okay, what I want you to know is these are basic symptoms of depression. Not everyone has all of them. You don't have to have all of these symptoms to have depression. But there is sort of a formula when we see people. You have to have a certain number. They have to last for a certain length of time, that sort of thing, in order for you to have a clinical depression. Clinical depression is different than a bad hair day. We know that, right? Oh, I'm so depressed, I don't have anything to wear. It's not that. It is depressed mood. It's loss of interest in things that you used to enjoy. It's changes in appetite, which can be accompanied by weight gain or weight loss, doesn't have to be. Sleep disturbance, next file, our next slide. Psychomotor changes. This has to do with some people pace. I've had people say, I just spent my whole day pacing my house. And other people say, I never get out of bed. I get out of bed and I move to the couch, and that's where I am for the rest of the day. So that would be the retardation is being on the couch, I can't get up, and the pacing is the agitation. We also can have tiredness, fatigue, low energy, many times a sense of worthlessness, excessive or inappropriate guilt, people taking on guilt that is not theirs to take, doesn't belong to them, impaired ability to think, concentrate, make decisions, thoughts of death and suicide. And again, these are not, you don't have to have them all in order to have depression. But I do want to just make a comment here. One of the things that we need to know for our own mental health during this time and to help the ones that we love, we need to know what's normal and what isn't. How do we know what is normal in a pandemic? There's nothing normal in the pandemic, is there? Our routines are not, there isn't anything that's normal. But I would say that looking at any of these symptoms or a bunch of these symptoms together, if they stay with you for more than 2 weeks, and if you find that you are impaired in your functioning, that is the critical thing. You cannot have clinical depression and be functioning. It begins to really slow you down, and clinical depression becomes what I call show stopping. Stops the show. I'm working with first responders now, and they'll say, I don't know why I got up one morning, but I didn't get up. I couldn't get out of bed. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't make myself get in the shower. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it anymore. Okay, so that's an example of the show-stopping nature of clinical depression. Now, we're going to talk just for a minute about different kinds of depression. So let's see, major depression. I'm going to quickly, I don't want to spend a lot of time here, but I want you to understand. Here is my graph. This is when I feel good. This is when I feel bad. And this is time. Major depression can happen to anybody, but I'm just going to say the average person, let's say the average person rotates around here with their mood, right? Sometimes they have a better day than others, but all of a sudden, whoa, show-stopping, the person falls into a major depression. This can last, it has to last in order to be diagnosed at least 2 weeks. But when it's really bad, it lasts way longer than 2 weeks. But with treatment and with prayer, eventually, these people get better. But they generally come back to their pre-level. Make sense? Okay, so that's what we call major depression. The next one is persistent depressive disorder. This used to have a fancy name that nobody could say, and I love it. It does not just say it all, it's persistent. It doesn't go away. 2 years duration, milder symptoms. One of the things that I ask people to find out, do they have that? I'll say, when was the last time that you were without these symptoms for 2 months at a time? And they look at me and they go, I can't remember when I didn't feel this bad. That's persistent depression. It looks like this. They wake up in the morning, they're a little lower. They go along like this, they too can have a major depressive episode. And when they recover, they usually recover back where they were. Persistent depressive disorder is one that people tend to have for a long time. Okay, bipolar disorder, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about that, but I'm sure you guys know that it has to intersperse with times of mania or hyper agitation. It's not feeling good. I want you to know mania is not a good place. It's an agitated place, and it's an out of control place. And what happens is people can go from way up here, agitated, to way down here. And there are big swings, and many of those people who are very sick with that cannot work. It's just too disrupting. And then we have seasonal affective disorder, which I think a lot of people have heard about in our area. Because we are so far north, our days in the winter are shorter, and our days are overcast. So many times starting in October, I'll see my patients kind of do a nosedive through Christmas and start to come out again in April. That would be a seasonal pattern. There's also a seasonal pattern that can be a summer pattern. Wouldn't that be a bummer? I don't know many people who've had that, but some people do. But it generally lasts just one season and then remits. All right, we're going to quickly go now. What do we do to treat it? Exercise, number one. Chris said this last time. Studies show across the board, year after year after year, mild to moderate depression is treated, okay, equally well with medication or exercise. Which would you rather do? It's a no-brainer, right? But here's the problem. People who are depressed have no energy and they have no motivation. So I always say, if we could bottle something that would get depressed people to exercise, I mean, that would be a multi-billion-dollar business, because there is the conundrum, right? If I would exercise, I'd feel better, but I don't feel like doing anything, and I certainly don't feel like exercising. But I want you to know that regular exercise is really just as effective as medication for mild to moderate depression. That's not show-stopping, okay? The show-stopping depression, you might need some extra help down there. All right, self-help books. We've got Amazon, we've got all kinds of things that we can look up online anymore. They have workbooks. And I want to just briefly mention the Bounce Back program is a wonderful program. It's workbooks that you get through your doctor, your medical doctor. If you don't have a medical doctor, you can go online to Bounce Back and you can register as a person who has no family doctor. But it is a really nice, there are little workbooks. There's one on anxiety and one on depression, and you do some exercises. And for some people, that's just all they need. It's free. This, I think, is one of the resources that came out just before the pandemic, and it's wonderful. So it's available to anyone. Support groups are also helpful, and Chris mentioned he does some support groups with Family Services of Windsor. They have a number of support groups, anxiety, depression, addiction, all kinds of things. And it helps some people to just become part of a group. They don't have to go and see a doctor, or they don't have to maybe do individual therapy, but just being involved with some other people, or even any kind of a community group that might be going on. Okay, talk therapy is what we usually do when people start getting more show-stopping, or the depression or anxiety is really affecting their life. They might want to go in, see a therapist. We often will use cognitive behavioral therapy, as Chris mentioned last week, because there's a lot of data that shows it works. Remember what he said? He said the thought. All right, I'm going to back up. He said there's an event. Remember, he said the event does not cause a feeling. That's too far away. The event causes a thought, an interpretation. Now the thought causes a feeling. Now that I have this feeling, I'm going to do this behavior. Okay, so that's what that's all about, learning to unchain that. And for deep depression, or depression that lasts for any length of time, medication is many times helpful. You need to see your family doctor for that. Okay, next screen. Now what we want to do, we want to prevent pandemic depression. I'm hoping that you don't all have depression here tonight, and that's why you came. So some of you, I hope we can prevent it. Whenever I talk to people, I always just remind them that there are really 4 spheres to our health. There's our biological, which is our physical body. There's our psychological, which is our mind. Joy touched on that, our mind, our will, our soul. There is our social. That's our interactions with other people. Human beings are very social animals, are they not? And there is the spiritual. Boy, it took me a long time. Never heard anything about the spiritual when I was in graduate school. And there are a lot of therapists out there that don't talk much about the spiritual. But if you want to be well, you need to be in balance. And the only way to be in balance is to have all 4 spheres that you're working with. Let's talk about what we do for the biological. So this is just a really simple way to remember this. Remember the seers in the Old Testament? That's what they called the prophets. So we want to be a seer in order to be well physically. We need to sleep, exercise, eat a healthy diet, and take time to relax and recharge. This is not easily said or done when you're very, very depressed, because insomnia and sleep problems are part of depression. Exercise, as we said, is hard to do. Most of us who are ill, especially with seasonal affective disorder, we want to eat donuts and carbohydrates. And that's not very healthy. And a lot of people are too busy they think they don't have time to relax and recharge. But if you could just keep in mind, it's just that simple. Just ask yourself, am I taking care of my body? Am I sleeping? Okay, get yourself to sleep at a regular time. Am I exercising? It doesn't have to be an hour a day, every day. I hear the most outrageous things. A woman came in the other day. She said, I'd like to exercise. That's going to be one of my goals. I said, okay, well, let's narrow it down. Let's make it specific. Well, I'm going to do 10,000 steps a day. I said, you are? Well, that's what I did before I was depressed. I said, well, since you've been depressed, how much have you exercised? How many times have you gone out for a walk? None. Okay, so She recognizes that it's important to exercise, but it's important to do what you can. That's where I'm going with this. My daughter laughs at me because I have this little routine of stretches that I try to do once a day. Okay, so maybe that takes me 10, 15 minutes. And she's a 20-something that, she would laugh at me about that. And I said, well, you can laugh at me, but I want to just see where we are when you're not doing that anymore and I'm still doing my little stretches. And indeed, that is what happened, right? Well, I don't want to exercise today. Well, of course you don't, because you make it be an hour and you make it be so hard, right? Okay, next slide. Let's look at the psychological part, psychological health. What do we need to do? In this pandemic, we need to quiet our minds. Very important. Keep a regular routine. Nothing seems normal. Some of us have not even returned from working at home. But as much as you can, find a normal routine and do that on a regular basis. Well, that includes going to bed at the same time every night, getting up at the same time in the morning, eating at regular intervals. With the pandemic, a lot of people just got really messed up with their eating. I can remember one lady said after our first lockdown, she said, okay, what was it? I wish I could remember exactly, but she says, okay, I've already eaten 4 times and I've been online all day. I don't know what else to do with myself, right? Because there didn't seem like there was anything else to do. But we want to find a regular routine. Absolutely important. Decrease the exposure to stress. Wow, how do we do that? It's everywhere. Limit access to the news. Limit access to social media. Social media is a wasteland for people, and it takes up a lot of their time. Studies show that people feel worse after they've spent time on Facebook, other venues such as that. There's a lot of comparison that people do when they're looking at other people's most perfect picture of their home, if it even is their home, or if they lied and said that that's where they live and it's not, right? And meanwhile, I'm thinking, oh, I'm never going to be like that, but it's not even real, right? So decrease all of that, right? Quiet your mind. Quiet things down. Okay, get in our regular routine, and let's do the next slide. Social. This has been the hardest thing with the pandemic. Who said loneliness? Man, the loneliness, was that not just awful in the very beginning? We were so cut off from each other. So in order to be well in our social realm, it's a bit more of a challenge with the pandemic, but we've always had some things that we were allowed to do. Even if it was wearing a mask and looking at a loved one through a window in the nursing home, we could still do that, right? So the point was to make use of the things that remain. The problem that I found was I would get discouraged and I would just get lazy. Well, if I can't do that, I don't even feel like doing this or that. And one of the things that I found was I would go into a funk on Sundays. So I began to ask myself, if I'm in a funk on Sundays, I'll bet there are other people that are in a funk on Sundays. And so I made a list. Who might be some people that I could reach out to when I'm lonely on a Sunday and connect with them? That helps them, but it also helped me tremendously. It was a way that I put connection into my routine on a regular basis. Surround yourself with safe people. What is a safe person? Safe people build us up. They encourage us, they love us, they are there for us. Unsafe people criticize us, put us down, leave us in a lurch. Sometimes the most unsafe people are in our own families. And it's really important for our whole wellness to limit the contact that we have with people who are very negative in our lives. We don't need to cut them out, and we don't need to be pointing a finger at them and saying, you're an unsafe person. No, we just need to know that for us, we need to be around people who build us up, who share our spiritual values, who will pray for us when we have problems. And I've already said, do something nice for someone else. It's so easy with the pandemic to just get into I, me, I miss this, I miss that. Let's get out of the I and think about someone else. What nice thing might I be able to do for someone? Gee, I could stop by with flowers for the lady down the street, or I could have my husband go and shovel their snow. But the whole idea is, get out of the I, me. All right, next slide, please. Spiritual. I know that I am talking to some churchgoers because some of you I know. And there may be others here who are from the community. Maybe going to church or having a spiritual life isn't part of who you are, but it is a really important part of being a whole person. So I always emphasize this. It's not unusual that I'll have people come into my office who never went to church as a child and whose parents never educated them in any way about any kind of faith. So I talk to them about developing a relationship with God, keeping it really simple, but just, most of us can tell by looking at this beautiful world where we live that there must be a beautiful creator who's created all of this. Granted, I don't always see that when I'm in downtown Windsor, but if I go up north or I go someplace where I'm in nature, it's easy to see that something higher than me has created this. And developing a relationship with something outside of myself is very grounding. I really encourage people feed their spirit. This is another area where I think a lot of us, with the pandemic, we just got, oh, ho-hum. I can't go to church, or I can't be in church, or I'm tired of going online, I'm tired of doing my little devotions all by myself, I can't have my coffee hour. Whatever it is, I think a lot of us have let that slip. And it's really important to keep your spirit fed, whatever that is for you. For my newcomers, I always recommend My Daily Bread. The little book that has a daily reading. I just say, if you've never had any encounter with God, I just encourage them, read this every day. It's got a little kind of a problem that somebody solves with a scripture. And then as they grow in that and they're doing that, I encourage them to follow reading the Bible in a year. So there's a lot that can be done with just a little, and there are other venues online, many for a daily devotional, that sort of thing. Or talk to your pastor, whatever you need to do, but find a way to feed your spirit. Joy. I loved the visual. I absolutely loved the engine. Okay, remember she had the engine here and the mine, da-da-da-da-da. They told me not to go too far away from here, and she moved the engine to different places. And she said, would the train still go if the engine was at the back? Yes, the engine would be pushing. Would the train still go if the engine was in the middle? Yes. It would be pushing the mind and stuff, but it would be pulling the caboose. It would still work. But would it really have the power? Would it really have the blessing that we can have in our life when we put the engine first? No. So I just really encourage people, first of all, develop a relationship with God. Find out what that power engine is all about. And then as we walk with Him, to be surrendering our lives, turning them over to Him, letting Him run the show. Which leads us to our next promise, 23rd Psalm. When the power engine is first, the Lord is my shepherd. And where does He take me? Does He take me to bad venues, bad things? No. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for His name's sake. Listen to this. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, the pandemic, going into its third year, I will fear no evil, for He is with me. That is a tremendous promise. Now, just as I was preparing this, and even as I just said that, I feel a difference when I say that. When I focus on that, I feel God's presence. I feel a hope. I feel more courageous. I feel like I don't have to be strong, but He's my strength because I've made Him my Lord, right? I put the power source first. Now, let's look at the next screen. We're going to have a little bit of fun here. We've got I've talked a long time. It's time to do some jumping jacks because I know you're probably falling asleep. But this, my personal plan of action for the pandemic. Just as an introduction, I want to say when the pandemic, we had our first lockdown, I remember my daughter is living away from home, and I contacted her and I said, I put together a list of all the things that I'm going to do during the lockdown. She said, oh, well, read it to me. So I was going to make a new recipe once a week. I was going to learn a new song on the piano once a month. I hardly ever played the piano. That was a lofty goal. Did I accomplish it? No. I was going to keep doing my stretches every day. Did I do that? No. But I had them on my list of things to do more days than not. I like to strive for that. More days than not. And I had some other things on there. This last lockdown, it was really different for me in terms of what I had on my stay sane. The first one was, how am I going to stay sane? This last one was, how am I going to maintain my equilibrium now? Because that's where we were at first, wasn't it? We were all afraid. We were crazy with fear. And we had to have things to do to keep us busy. I love to eat out and relax with my husband and just have somebody serve me. And suddenly it was like, every night I have to fix a meal. Where's this going, right? And that was just for me, but other people, it's the gym or it's whatever they did that they weren't able to do anymore. So we're going to go to the next slide because I'm teaching you something about how you are going to put together your personal plan of action. Goals should be what we call SMART, right? This is how to remember how to do a good goal. So S, they should be specific. I want you to think about my client who said, I'm going to walk 10,000 steps a day, every day for the week. Was it specific? Yes, it was very specific. Measurable. Was it measurable? She had a watch. Measurable? Yeah, her little watch would tell her, oh, I'm at 954. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? A, was it attainable? She had done that prior to becoming depressed, nearly every day. I don't know. Was it attainable? Probably, if she wasn't depressed. But was it realistic? This is a woman, she told me, she goes, well, I'm really a pajama person. She goes, when I was raising my kids, we used to just have pajama days. I loved that, and I'm doing that now, she said. Okay, so was it realistic that she's going to do 10,000 steps a day? I don't think so. Step one, we had to get her dressed in the morning, right? Okay, and the last one, timely. Okay, so she said, I'm going to go every day for a week. So at the end of the week, she would be able to measure, did she do it or didn't she? Okay, so we're going to go back to our previous one, my personal plan of action. Who brought their notebooks? Do you have their notebooks? Okay. Your wife brought her notebook for you. Okay. 5 goals. 5 goals for what you are going to do for your personal plan of action to stay well in these, I hope it's the last phases of the pandemic, but we just don't know. We have no idea where we're going from here. But what we want to do, I always tell people, let's not try to be superheroes. Let's try to maintain what we have. Let's not lose what we have. Let's just try to maintain and then see where we go from there. So I'm just curious. We had, what did they used to call that when there were people from the peanut gallery? I had all these feelings over there in the end side, so maybe we can get, what are some reasonable goals that you guys think might be a good goal for somebody to have as one of their pandemic plan of action goals? There's no right or wrong. Think positive. All right, let's look at that. That's a very smart idea, but let's see if it's a smart goal. Can we go back to our smart? Is it specific? Well, there's a difference between positive and negative. It's specific enough, maybe. Speak positive, okay. It could be more specific, but it's okay. Is it measurable? Yeah. Is there somebody that's going to be around you that's going to go, that was negative? But is it attainable? It's very difficult for some people to be positive. But if that is your goal, then it would be important to set some parameters around that. Speak positively is like too broad. So you might want to say, more specifically, I am going to say 2 positive affirmations a day. Affirmation, big word, but a positive affirmation would be something like, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Okay, and then later on in the day, I might say, wow, that was a really good meal I prepared. So if my goal was to say 2 negative things to myself in a day, that was specific, it was measurable. I could say which ones they were. It was attainable. It was only 2, especially for people right now. A lot of people are negative with the pandemic to say, not a single negative word is going to come out of my mouth. I just have to tell you the funniest story about that. So I have a veteran that I've been seeing. His problem is anger. He decided on his own that he was going to have a swearing jar. And every time he swore, he was going to put $1 in the jar. So I said, I wasn't sure he was going to follow through, but the next week when he came, I said, well, how's your swearing jar coming? He goes, well, I got about, maybe he was putting in 20, I don't know. I've got about $400 in there now, he said. Okay. But you know what? He made a specific goal. I want to stop swearing. He made it measurable when he found himself doing it. He caught himself and he deposited some money. He knew he wasn't going to be perfect at it. And as he's going on, interestingly enough, he said to me a couple weeks ago, I am far less depressed than I was since I've been on my journey to speak more positively. And that was really very significant. All right, we have time maybe for another one. Let's have somebody else. Another idea for what could be on your list? A goal, smart goal?
How would do a walk several times a week?
Perfect. Go for a walk several times a week. Is it specific? Yes. We might want to say, how far are you going to walk? We might want to say, I'm going to walk at least around the block 3 times a week. Good. Okay, so now it's specific. We know we're going to be walking. We know how often. Is it measurable? You did it or you didn't. Is it attainable? Yeah, you can do 3 times a week around the block. Is it realistic? Yes, it's realistic. Is it timely? You have a time frame on it. Yes, by the end of the week, I will know, did I do this? Did I walk 3 times? Very good. Excellent. Can we have one more? One more example? Okay, this is good. Okay, so somebody might say, I want to increase my spiritual health, and I want to be more mindful or more regular with my devotions. So what might be a goal that you could set for yourself? Not you, but you hypothetically. What could you set as a goal?
Every day, like a certain plan.
Okay.
A certain type, like maybe it's a topical.
Okay, so your goal would be to have devotional time every day on a particular topic, and are you going to, it needs to be timely, right? So what are we going to do with the timeline there?
So, like a specific time each day at the same time over the course of 7 days. So every day at 7:30 in the morning, do a devotion, and spend X amount of time before you start your day. Not necessarily all in prayer, but doing a specific devotion.
Okay, I just want to repeat that for those who are watching. It's to do a devotion every morning, 7 days a week, 7:30 in the morning, to be reading and then maybe following that up with prayer, so that every day begins with spiritual feeding. Okay, is it specific? Yes. Is it measurable? Yes, she does it or she doesn't. Is it attainable? That would not be attainable for me. Is it attainable for you? That's what you do. Okay, wonderful. So 7:30 works for you. And it works for you every single day. So that is a realistic goal for you.
Maybe once in a while we just talk, but we do try to do the actual devotion every day.
Good, excellent. Okay. I'm very impressed. Okay, and is it realistic? Yes, realistic for you. And is it timely? Yes. By the end of the week, you would say, yes, 7 days a week. We gathered together at 7:30, and we had some spiritual feeding together before our day. Now, again, the only reason I say that, it would not be reasonable for me because I'm not a morning person to be up and be focused at 7:30. You never used to be either. Okay, well, maybe that's a good thing that the pandemic has done for you. I don't know. But you get the idea. Everybody is different. So for me to say, well, okay, I'm going to do devotions every day at 7:30 in the morning, I would fail at that. I would be setting myself up for failure. So if I'm going to do a goal for myself about feeding, I need to find when that works best for me, when I'm the most focused, when I have the most quiet time. And I might say I'd like to do it 7 times a week, but if I know that I have a chaotic life, maybe I've got lots of little kids in the house and I've got this and that going on, or I'm working from home, or my husband's working from home, that might not be realistic. And so I might want to just say, well, timely, I'm going to try to do that 3 times a week. Do you see what I'm saying? Make it reasonable and realistic for you. Good job, everybody. So you are going to go, our homework before next week, when you come back to hear Dr. Lord, is that each of you is going to be challenged to think about going home and putting together your personal pandemic coping plan. Just 5 things that you might put on there. They might be things that you're already doing. That would be great, because we want to maintain, right? It isn't necessarily about saying, well, I'm going to go from 0 to 60. Most people don't do that, but they go in little steps. So I would just really like to encourage that you would take that home and follow up with the information that I've given you. We've talked about a lot of things. We're going to have just a brief question and answer period where you will have to come, if you don't mind, to the microphone. And I do ask, every time I go somewhere to talk about depression or anxiety, somebody says something very personal. We would rather not have that. I don't want your personal information in front of anybody, and especially not online. So please make it a general question, and be glad to answer for a couple of minutes here. Anybody have anything? Hi. You can take your mask off so we can hear you better.
So I found it interesting that seasonal affective disorder is a summertime thing as well. In a winter, is it not because of the light? But in the summer, there's still light. So what causes it in the summertime?
That is an excellent question that they have not figured out.
Really?
Yes. Because I didn't talk about, and I don't know if I had it on the slide still or not, but for seasonal affective disorder in the winter,
Yeah.
we can get a light.
You can get the light, the happy
Yes.
light, yeah.
Yeah, and being in front of the light for a half hour, the light has to be a certain intensity for a certain length of time, and that seems to alleviate the depression. It's cheap, it's free, but you know what, I'll tell you, people don't do it. Why do you think? What? They don't have the time? What else? Discipline? Discipline. It's so simple. Isn't it a lot like, who was the guy that got healed of leprosy? Was it Naaman? Naaman. Naaman didn't like it because he could have gone in his own dirty river. You know, it was just, he just didn't like the whole idea about it. And telling people to get a light, they'll often get one and they'll use it for a short time and then, just kind of. But then you hear them still complaining, right? It's almost like it's too simple. And remember what they said to Naaman, if the prophet had asked you something difficult, you would have done it, wouldn't you? He's just asking you to go and bathe in the water 3 times. But anyway, that was just a little aside. But no, we don't know. So, gosh, you're Sharon, right? If you can figure that out, do the research,
I'm gonna figure it out.
that would be great.
I'll get back to you.
You'll get back to me. Excellent. That'd be great. Anything else? That was a great question.
You were talking about exercise. Now, I've heard it's good to exercise before you go to sleep at night. Is there a reason for that? Or is it better in the morning, or?
Well, that's a good question. I don't like to get too picky about that because I just tell people, I want you to exercise. Just do it somehow. And if you doing it in the evening helps you get it done, then that's fine. But most of the experts, I think, will say it's better not to be revving your body up before sleep, because sleep is such an important part of our wellness, and we want to have I call it kind of a good night routine. We want to cue the body that it's getting time for bed. We want to quiet down. We don't want to be jumping around or getting our heart rate way up. And one of the things that is advisable for seasonal affective disorder is what they call light walking, which is walking in the mornings, early in the morning, to reset the biological clock, right? So we're getting massive sunlight. Even if it's overcast, there's a lot more light outside than there is when we're inside. But most of what I've read, some seem to favor the morning, but I just think in general, for well-being, it's just when you can.
Yeah.
Just,
Okay, thank you.
Just do it, just like Nike says, right?
If I felt that I was okay, normal, functioning well before the pandemic, and this has affected me detrimentally, if there was an end to it, let's say April the 1st, 2022, would everything just automatically reset because it's over and that was the thing that was bothering me? Or have things happened to me that I'm going to have an action plan and do some smart things?
I don't know. I don't know. I think if everything was over in April, I say open because thinking everything would be open, we wouldn't have to wear masks anymore, we could hug again, we could hold hands, we could be in groups, we could go to weddings and dance. I think it's not going to be instantaneous. Particularly when we talked about in the beginning the large numbers of people who are experiencing depression and anxiety. It will be over time as things get back to normal, that people will get back to normal. You didn't like that answer?
No, so I'm just trying to process it while you're sharing. So what I'm suggesting is that when that comes, I'm going to believe that's a when, not an if. When that comes, I think lots of people feel that there will just be a reset, right? It's like reboot and everything's ahead. But are we to understand that damage has been done, whether we recognize it or not, and that we're going to have to do something intentional, regardless of whether the pandemic ends on April the 1st, 2022?
I'm not sure that I'm really understanding your question. Are you saying, will it just automatically jump back to normal?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I really don't think so, because we are organisms and it has affected us biologically, psychologically, socially, and spiritually. And it will take a while for that. I would liken it to someone who has had an injury and they've had to go to physiotherapy to build that muscle again. And it's going to be a while before they don't have pain anymore, or they feel like, gee, I got this new knee and wow, look, I'm walking better than I was walking before I got it. But there was a process to get there. I think that we're going to have a process.
So it's important for all of us to understand that there's not just going to be an automatic reset, and if you feel you've been affected, then you better do some homework and have a plan, or you may not get back to where you were, or certainly not in a timely way.
I think so. And maybe what you're saying is, do I think that they ought to do their homework? Yes.
Okay.
I think it's well worth your time to do your homework. And again, as I said, when we had our first lockdown, my goal was to not go crazy. My goal now is to maintain what equilibrium I still have. But it's different. Each phase of the pandemic has been different for us. But I don't believe it's going to be suddenly like they turn on the lights again and everyone is going to be fine. There are people that have gotten so accustomed to socially distancing that they like it. And many of my clients who are very, very ill and have trouble socially interacting with other people, this is the greatest thing for them. I can't make them go anywhere. But that's hurt them, actually. And in order for people to rebound to healthy, some of us need to not just rebound to where we were, maybe we weren't all that healthy before. But what I've shared with you today is telling you how you can be healthier than you've ever been, maybe. Thinking about the 4 spheres, our bio, our psycho, our social, our spiritual, and being intentional about having some goals in that regard, and ask God to help you with them. Ask Him to help you see what maybe you need to work on, and ask Him to help you in His grace come up with a plan that's reasonable, realistic, that you will follow through on, and that will really bear fruit for you, because I think that's what we're looking for. So I think one more last question, and then we'll be done for tonight.
The thought, one of the things you talked about was sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, my mind revs up at night, and then I'll get to sleep, and then I wake up, and then that's it. I can't get back to sleep.
Does anybody else want to share? Yeah, how many of you still have that problem too? A lot of people have that problem. And what was your question?
So what are is there any techniques you can help yourself? You quote scripture and that kind of thing, you put things on. I found when I was putting my phone on, it was stirring my thoughts, so I left my phone off.
Yes. Well, there are a lot of recommendations. If you look online about insomnia, not even having a device in your bedroom is a good idea. Mm-hmm. Having a wind down time in the evening where you're cueing your body. We're going to be going to bed soon, so slow down. No screens 2 hours before bed. Maybe a relaxing bath or a warm shower. Again, these are things that you're telling your body, we're through for the day. You're not going to get on the phone and get into a big conversation with someone, avoid arguments at night, that sort of thing. But what you're talking about is a problem that a lot of people have. Their mind just, I've had people say, I'm fine until I lie down, and then it's, so I would just encourage you there are a lot of good sites. And just a word about this, if you're going online to look up some information, medical things or something, stay with, we all know this, but I like to say it anyway, stay with a reputable website, Canadian Mental Health, or in the States we've got the Mayo Clinic, the Cleveland Clinic, well-known, reputable medical sites, but avoid, everybody's got something to say, and anybody can have a website. But there are some specific things that you can do that will help you sleep. I encourage you to look into it.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. For those of you that are online,
good job.
Appreciate that, Dr. Skidmore. Looking forward to having Dr. Lord with us next week, actually for the next 2 weeks, and so we are anticipating that. For those of you that are online, we say goodbye to you, and also remind that those sites are going to be up. Those sessions are going to be up in perpetuity, more or less, so you can watch them tonight, next week, next month, whenever they best suit you. We want to say thank you for each and every one of you for coming, and if next week is good for you, talking about taking care of yourself as it relates to conflict and those kinds of issues, if there's been some of that stuff, either at home, at work, or at play, and Dr. Lord is going to help us come to some kind of decisions and resolutions and things that we can do in order to help us just take care of ourselves in any conflict that we might be running into because of the pandemic. Just being good people, good Christians, those kinds of things, showing some grace and truth. So God bless you. Thanks for coming.
Yes.
Let the king of my heart be the shadow where I hide. God is holding on. And when the night is holding on to me, God is holding on.